Hi there! Today I want to talk to you about translation versus localization. Specifically, what's the difference? Over the years, I've worked with developers and designers who only spoke one language. And when discussing translation and localization with them, they weren't always sure what's the difference and what are the actual pitfalls. What should I take into consideration if I want to create something for multiple languages? And so I think everybody knows what translation is. Taking something that was created in one language and conveying it efficiently in another language. You might think that all you need to do is translate the words in a way that makes sense grammatically. That's what Google Translate does and similar services. But it doesn't always really work, as I'm sure you've seen if you've ever looked at any of those translations. So why is that? Localization is when you take something and provide a context that might not be a literal translation of what was in the source material, but it makes more sense in the message that you're trying to convey in the translated language. Let's say we're talking about making art, and we want to use Bob Ross as an example of an art teacher who's sort of happy and conveys sort of the joy of making art. Now, translating that to Danish, which is my first language, is problematic because nobody really knows who Bob Ross is. So in this case, a pop culture reference will ruin the message that we're trying to convey, or at least cause confusion for the audience. So what do? In this case, I would think of a guy named Jan Klimi, who, at least my generation, will remember him appearing on TV, humming little songs and making little artsy things. And I think that would be a good sort of Bob Ross equivalent. And that's localization in terms of translating a pop culture reference into something that's more relevant to the culture it's being translated to. Another example would be food. There's lots of dishes and like specialties that are regional. Since I'm doing this in English, I'm going to assume that English is your first language and you might be from America. So you're probably familiar with s'mores, a popular snack for those who are not, typically created by friends gathering around a campfire, melting some or toasting some marshmallows and sticking them between some graham crackers with some chocolate, and that's a s'more. Now, we don't really do s'mores so much in Denmark. Well, in this case, I would use snobrød, which is basically just you make some dough and you wrap it around a stick and you bake it on a stick over the campfire. It's completely different. It's not even sweet at all, but it still conveys that experience of making something together over a campfire with friends. So if that's what I'm trying to convey, that's what I would go for. You have to really go case by case and think about, in the context of the message, what makes sense. Other parts of localization that I should probably mention include measurements, miles per hour, kilometers per hour, that sort of thing, pounds, kilograms, inches, centimeters. A lot of that can probably be handled by computers, but sometimes it's not always done right, so something that should be checked. Finally, there is the whole case of sort of sensitive topics. Especially when you're trying to translate humor, you really want to watch out for things like sarcasm, irony, even things like satire. It's very difficult to translate these things directly without twisting the meaning somehow. It could be misunderstood, and especially if you're venturing into the politically incorrect areas, talking about things like sex, violence. If you're planning to market your product in, let's say, China, for instance, you don't want to be criticizing China in your product or offending Chinese people in your translation. So if you're translating and localizing to Chinese, these are things to keep in mind when you're looking at the source material. Same goes for, say, if you're launching a game in Germany, you don't want to have any references to Nazis in there. It's illegal. So that's localization as well. Sensitive things to keep in mind. So let's sum up real quick. Pop culture references, sensitive things like humor, political issues, taboos, cultural issues, but also things like measurements, that sort of thing. These are all parts of localization, and it goes way beyond just making the words match up to their source language equivalent and getting the grammar right. I hope that clears up some of the mystery of the differences between just straight up translation and localized text or content. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. If you think I'm wrong, tell me so. If I forgot something, let me know. And thanks for watching.